Hello, lovelies, and welcome back to An Angel's Life of Bookish Goodness. Today's segment is Saturday Story Time, and I am reading one of the short stories from James Dorr's Tombs, Chronicle of Latterday Earth, and this is a novel and stories which I absolutely loved. I will put the link to my review down in the comments below. I did get permission from the author to share this story with you, just to give you kind of a teaser. I won't say that this was one of my favorite stories. I think that this is a great piece that isn't too risque. Some of the stories are, I would not want to read them out loud, let alone on the internet. But it gives you a good flavor for the storytelling style in this novel and stories. And it is one of the stories that I found very interesting that I felt would be best to share so that you didn't get lost. This story is The Carnival of Animals. 2 by 2 they passed through the new city, these the beasts of the southern and eastern wastes, and not just beasts only. And as they went their way, there seemed so many that some questions what was left. They'd just made love. They stood now, he naked on the balcony of her new city tower apartment that looked over the river and beyond it, the tombs. She, still inside, gathering up her clothing. She searched for a towel to wipe the sheen of sweat from her breasts and thighs, while he, outside, stretched and gazed to the streets below. She watched him do this, she wondering herself how this night would play out as she brought him a towel too, glimpsing as she did the river causeway, the soft green glow west of its mausoleums, the tomb's central pyramid, and, beyond even that, flickering blue ghoul lights. He'd been with her the whole day before, from the rising of the bloated red sun, whose heat grew violent with each passing year. They'd made love more than once, but now she wondered. He would not press her. He was a scholar, and scholars did not press. They worked through persuasion. But he had hinted that the time was coming, that they should commit themselves one to the other, to husband and wife themselves in the new city's ways. And so she questioned. He was a scholar, a man of respect, yes, a man of some wealth, enough to woo her. But he, a young scholar, in the way of scholars at all times, was so pedantic and dull to her. He, as a scholar, spoke only of learning, of her too, of course, when they lay together, but even then speaking more in the manner of a school teacher than, as she imagined, a romantic lover. She had dreamed once of being carried off by pirates. She'd heard that there were pirates still, far away to the south, who plundered the ocean. She glanced again toward him, the downing of his heavy chest, and then past him to the wide toxin-stained river, reflecting the tomb's lights, and wondered, were there pirates on that river too, or only boat gypsies? She had thought once how fine it might be if she'd been born a river princess. But then he called her name. Padme, he said, you must see this. She strode out to join him. She looked again, first at him, still unclothed, absent-mindedly toweling his waist and the fronts of his thighs. But then he pointed, the towel dropping. Eponine, he said again, look. She moved beside him to see where he pointed. Yes, Partimar? She asked. He leaned to her and tongued her ear gently. The street below, he said. The main street that leads to the causeway, that even now should be crowded with corpse carts bringing the dead across the tombs, those that have not survived the day. Even now he spoke like a scholar, explaining things, putting them in their context. Instead, see those shadows? She leaned across the balcony's raised lip, straining to see down. She noted, on other balconies just like hers, couples, and sometimes small groups, staring downwards as well. She squinted to see past the flash of neon, the bright burning glare of the new city's colored light, turned on each night at the final hour of dusk to rival the day sun in brilliance, if not heat. She gazed past the frames of the now folding awnings, rolling out again each dawn to shade the city's ways for those who must be out, even if swaddled in day masks and shadowers. She stared, her eyes straining. She saw, first, a motion, now just below, but east, approaching the causeway, a shadow, a blackness. Ghouls, she wondered? Not ghouls, he answered. Ghouls carry corpse lights, their blue flames flickering, even when otherwise empty-handed. But these, she nodded, yes, these are but shadows, or rather, something that travels in shadows. He leaned and kissed her throat. We could go down and see. She nodded, yes, It would be quite the distraction. We must be chattered and Damasked as well, though, and sun-hatted too, even if it's just early night. Even if we go down just for a little, there may, you understand, be people on the street I wouldn't wish to see. Of course, he answered. He, a scholar, would know as well as she that women of her class might have more than just one single lover. It was what made what he hinted at so hard for her. Nevertheless, it was required by etiquette, at least until such commitments were made, that one still pretend, that one not overtly thrust one lover, as it were, under another's nose. Thus one disguised oneself. One could, of course, afterwards invite old lovers into one's home, with one's husband's approval, to compare with him the ones one did not choose, to flatter him thus that way. Also, perhaps, as a favor to old lovers, to find them new women that they might pair with now, never as beautiful as oneself, to be sure, but still attractive ones that they might love with pride. She bowed her head as he chose a damask of neutral design, made of beaten silver, and helped her fasten it over her face. She shrugged on her chador, not bothering to put on anything underneath, other than those few wisps that she'd already found, while he chose his own mask, unadorned also, and of a bronze color. They wore matching sun hats as they then descended through the crowded stair-tubes, breathing their neighbors' perfumes with their own, to an upper street level, feeling the heat as they left the building, but feeling the breeze from the river as well. Pushing through the crowds, it was as if everyone had had the same idea, even if, looking up, she still saw some faces that gazed down from balconies dozens of floors above. "Padme," she whispered, "will we be safe here?" "We must hold hands, Padme," he whispered back, "so that we cannot be separated. Then we'll be safe enough." "Yes," she whispered. They found a spot on a bridge that crossed the street, one made for foot traffic and not vehicles, where there was space to watch, while the shadowed mass approached, now just a few blocks away, breaking up into parts. Eponine saw what it was first. "Partimir," she said, gripping his hand hard. "It looks like animals. Hundreds of animals. Thousands, maybe. Big ones, Partimir." He put one hand around her shoulder. Even now, the first of them had come near enough to recognize that they were not all of one kind, but of varying species. Some, she recalled, now from reading in books, were surely enemies to the others nearest them. Some shaped as great cats, while others seemed more as prey, some cloven-hooved, some horned, yet all pressing side by side. The first of these thundered beneath their footbridge. "Eponine," he said, above the noise. "These are southern beasts, from the great grass plains to the east of the river that borders the desert." They watched as the others came. Some more lizard-like now, some plated as six-legged armadillos, and huge enough to scrape their bridge's bottom. She wrapped her own arms around his waist and hugged herself to him until the shaking stopped. Some shaped as tortoises, yet with long legs and fast. Some shaped as insects. "And desert beasts, too," he said. "Yes," she answered. And others came, birds then, great vultures and monstrous shrikes, owl forms and juggers running on long crabbed legs as if too tired to fly, carrion birds and hawks and crows, scaled birds and wingless birds, and yet with sharp razored beaks, shrieking into the sounds of the others, of lowings and snarlings and roarings and high sharp barks, squealings and harsh scrapings, lobster-like creatures adapted to land-dwelling, and snakes and beetles. They watched as the first spilled past onto the causeway. They pushed their own way to their footbridge's other side to see more closely. She shuddered against him as he tried to comfort her. "Think of it just as their étoiles, Eponine, their star of fate, that they run towards the tombs this way. But it is the tombs, or at least the bridge to the tombs that they are on. They are no more than beasts. Why would they go there? And now you speak of them having les étoiles, as if they were persons, humans like you and me. You are a scholar. Do animals have souls?" "Some say they do, Eponine," he answered. "Perhaps not a psyche, as you and I have, that makes us distinct, self-conscious beings, our individuality, if you will, but surely they have such a thing as a destiny. They may transmigrate, yes, into new bodies when they at last die, so that much is lost to them, that spiritual glue that holds all together. But there is an animus, that which moves them now, that for which, perhaps, they now seek final rest. Or maybe they have come to us as a warning." There was a silence, a sudden silence among the watchers as those on the footbridge, the walkways below them, the ledges up above, all ceased their conversing. For below, on the causeway, the vanguard of the animals had stopped, dead in its center. Then, turning abruptly north, they plunged through the causeway rail. Those behind followed, a stream of beasts now diving into the river below, swimming against its stream, striving further north. to who knew what ultimate destination. And once again there were sounds, splashings, laughter, talk, roars and grunts, squeals and screeches. Perhaps they are a warning for us, Padme. He had to shout in her ear to be heard, that something terrible has happened south of us. Maybe the ocean is boiling over. The first of the animals were floating back now, already succumbing to the built-up poisons of the river's water. The birds were among the first, they perhaps the least suited of all for swimming. She interrupted him. "Take me home, Partirmar." He nodded. "Yes," he said. Holding her hand firmly, he led her back across the footbridge, over the broad street that led to the causeway, remnants of the animals' mass still coursing westward towards the river. Some of the smaller, more familiar ones were with them now as well, rats and weasels, but not all the rats, of course. Rats were indigenous to the new city, too. Spiders and centipedes, large ones as well as small. He took her home as she had asked, seeing her safely to her apartment. He left her there, returning himself to his own dwelling further to the east of the new city, promising to call on her the next night. She thought of him then, the sight of him standing alone on her balcony, just as she stood now. She gazed, her eyes straining at the bloated corpses, more of them now, nearly choking the river as they floated back to the south from whence they'd come. She watched the whole night through, and felt sorry for them. These, the true innocents. But what she saw in her mind was Partimar, his towel dropping, pointing down towards the street below, and she thought that that part of him was certainly not dull. She remembered then his remarks about souls, and if animals had them, and wondered if these souls had finally found peace. But what she thought was that, as a scholar, what he owned was knowledge. And yes, it was pedantic sometimes. He praised her beauty. It was true he loved her, but often by way of metaphors, similes, figures of speech like that, flattering yet long-winded. Often he likened her beauty to that of those women of legends, the Ulans, the Chandras, the Tashiks, the Trinities, even that one named the Beautiful Corpse, those known to have been great seductresses of their time. But weren't all such now dust? She made up her mind then. She remembered one more thing Partimar had said, that maybe the animals had come as a warning, that something portentous had, perhaps, occurred downriver. She couldn't quite grasp it, but there was something now to her to be in such learning as his. Somehow, a kind of protection. And that's the end of that story. This is a really deep thinking story, and the world that he has built is absolutely incredible. So if that story tugged at you at all, I strongly recommend that you pick up this book because I absolutely loved it. You can check out my reviews and see exactly what I had to say about the stories. As I mentioned, this was not even one of my favorites. There are many more that are much more deep. The way that he overlays the actual event that's occurring and ties it into the way she's thinking about what's happening in her own life and how all of it combines with the whole world that he's created in the tombs, the Chronicle of Latterday Times on Earth, is just absolutely amazing. I strongly recommend you pick it up. I will have the links to the book in the description down below. If you decide to give it a read, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. If you like this story time, give it a thumbs up to let me know that you enjoyed it. And if this is your first time visiting us, be sure to subscribe down below. Hit that little bell button so you'll get notifications whenever there's a new video out. And until next time, keep reading.